The wind howled like a wounded animal across the frozen plains as Tabitha Owens stumbled through knee-deep snow, one hand clutching her swollen belly and the other gripping the reins of her exhausted mare. She had been traveling for 3 days through the unexpected January blizzard of 1878, trying to reach Yuba City, California, where her late husband's brother supposedly lived, though she had never met the man and possessed only a crumpled letter with his name and location. The baby inside her kicked hard against her ribs, as if protesting this journey as much as her aching body did, and she whispered through cracked lips that they would survive this. They had to survive this, because giving up meant dying alone in this white wilderness. The ranch house materialized through the swirling snow like a blessing from heaven itself. Tabitha could barely make out its dark wooden frame against the pale chaos of the storm, but smoke rose from the chimney, proof of life and warmth within. She urged her mare forward, though the poor creature could barely lift her hooves anymore. Each step felt like an eternity. Each breath burned her lungs with cold, and the baby seemed to grow heavier with every passing moment, as though sensing safety was near and demanding to be born immediately. She reached the porch and half fell against the door, pounding with whatever strength remained in her frozen limbs. The door swung open so quickly she nearly collapsed into the arms of the man who answered. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of strong coffee. Those eyes widened as they took in her condition, the snow-covered cloak barely concealing her heavily pregnant form. "Sweet mercy," he breathed, catching her before she could fall. "Get inside, quickly now." Tabitha tried to speak, tried to explain who she was and why she had come, but her teeth chattered so violently no words would form. The cowboy half carried her into the warmth of the house, kicking the door shut against the howling wind. He guided her to a chair near the blazing fireplace and immediately began removing her frozen outer garments with practiced efficiency. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his voice deep and steady despite the urgency in his movements. "Can you tell me your name?" "Tabitha," she managed through chattering teeth. "Tabitha Owens. I am looking for James Owens. I was told he lives near Yuba City." The cowboy paused in the act of wrapping a thick blanket around her shoulders. "James Owens was my neighbor. He died last autumn, kicked by a horse that spooked during a cattle drive. I am sorry to bring you such news when you are in this condition." The words hit Tabitha like a physical blow, and she felt tears begin to stream down her frost-burned cheeks. Her husband's brother had been her only hope, the only family connection she had left in this world. Now that hope lay buried in some California grave, and she was alone, heavily pregnant, and stranded with a stranger during a blizzard. "Please do not cry," the cowboy said gently, kneeling before her so their eyes were level. "You are safe here, I promise you that. My name is Mitchell Yates, and this is my ranch. You and your child are welcome to stay as long as you need." Tabitha searched his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive, but found only genuine concern and kindness. "I have some money," she said, her voice still shaking. "I can pay for room and board until the storm passes." Mitchell shook his head firmly. "I would not take your money even if you had a fortune. No one pays for basic human decency in my house. Now, when did you last eat a proper meal?" She tried to remember but could not. The past few days had been a blur of cold and exhaustion, of forcing herself to keep moving because stopping meant death. "I am not certain," she admitted. "Then that is the first order of business," Mitchell said, rising to his feet. "I have stew on the stove and I will make you some hot tea. You need to warm up slowly from the inside out. Have you felt the baby move recently?" The question startled her with its intimacy, but she realized he was asking from genuine concern, not impropriety. Yes, constantly. The child seems very unhappy with our current circumstances. A small smile crossed Mitchell's face, the first she had seen from him. Smart baby, then. Only a fool would be happy in a blizzard like this one. This is the worst storm I have seen in 5 years of living here. You are fortunate you found my ranch when you did. Another hour out there, and you might not have survived. The truth of his words settled over Tabitha like a heavy weight. She had been so close to dying, so close to taking her unborn child into the darkness with her. The realization made her tremble harder than the cold had, and she pulled the blanket tighter around herself as Mitchell moved to the stove. The ranch house was modest but well kept, she noticed, as feelings slowly returned to her extremities. A single large room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room, with a fireplace that threw dancing shadows across rough wooden walls. A door in the back likely led to a bedroom. Everything was neat and organized in a way that suggested Mitchell lived alone and took pride in his home despite its simplicity. He returned with a bowl of steaming stew and a cup of tea, both of which he pressed into her still shaking hands. "Eat slowly," he instructed. "Your stomach will not take kindly to eating too fast after going so long without." Tabitha obeyed, taking small sips of the tea first. It was strong and hot and tasted better than anything she could remember. The warmth spread through her chest and belly, and she felt the baby shift as if also appreciating the nourishment. When she began on the stew, she had to fight the urge to devour it all at once. The meat was tender, the vegetables perfectly cooked, and the broth rich with flavor. Mitchell watched her eat with an expression she could not quite read. When she was halfway through the bowl, he spoke again. "May I ask about the father of your child? Is he coming to meet you here?" Tabitha's hand stilled on the spoon. She had known the question would come eventually, but that did not make it easier to answer. "My husband died 4 months ago. We were traveling from Kansas to California to start fresh, to build a new life. He fell ill on the journey and never recovered. By the time we reached Nevada, he was gone." "I am sorry for your loss," Mitchell said quietly, and the sincerity in his voice nearly undid her composure entirely. "I found a letter among his possessions mentioning his brother James in California. I had nowhere else to go, no family of my own, so I continued west. I thought perhaps James would help me, or at least point me toward work I could do to support myself and the baby. I did not expect the storm, and I certainly did not expect to find James had died as well." Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "How far along are you? The baby should come within the next few weeks, perhaps sooner. I was hoping to reach Yuba City and find a midwife before the time came. There is a midwife in town, but the storm has closed the roads. No one can travel safely until it passes, which could be days from now." He turned to look at her directly. "If the baby comes before then, I will do everything in my power to help you, though I confess my experience is limited to birthing cattle and horses." Despite everything, Tabitha felt a small laugh escape her lips. "I suppose the principle is the same, though I hope I prove less troublesome than a mare." Mitchell's answering smile was warm and genuine. "Something tells me you are considerably braver than most horses I have known. Traveling through a blizzard while 9 months pregnant takes a special kind of courage or perhaps desperation." "Both, I think," Tabitha admitted. She finished the stew and set the bowl aside, feeling more human than she had in days. "Thank you, Mr. Yates. You have saved my life and my child's life. I will not forget this kindness." "Mitchell, please. And you need not thank me for doing what any decent person would do. Now you should rest. You can take my bed and I will sleep out here by the fire." Tabitha started to protest, but Mitchell held up a hand. I insist. You need proper rest more than I do, and the bedroom will be warmer and quieter. Besides, I need to go check on your horse and make sure she is settled in the barn with food and water. The mention of her mare filled Tabitha with guilt. In her own desperation, she had nearly forgotten about the animal that had carried her through the storm. Is she all right? I pushed her so hard. She is exhausted but alive, which means she is better off than many horses would be after such a journey. I will take good care of her, I promise. Now, can you walk to the bedroom, or shall I carry you? Tabitha's pride made her want to insist she could walk, but when she tried to stand, her legs nearly gave out beneath her. Mitchell caught her easily, lifting her into his arms as though she weighed nothing despite her pregnant state. She wanted to protest, but the warmth of his chest against her cheek and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat made her feel safer than she had in months. He carried her into the bedroom and laid her gently on the bed, which was covered in thick quilts and furs. Sleep as long as you need, he said softly. I will be here if you require anything. Tabitha wanted to stay awake, wanted to make sense of this strange turn her life had taken, but exhaustion pulled at her like a riptide. The moment her head touched the pillow, she felt consciousness slipping away. The last thing she was aware of was Mitchell carefully removing her boots and covering her with an additional blanket, his touch gentle and respectful. When she woke, gray daylight filtered through the window, though the wind still howled outside. For a moment, Tabitha could not remember where she was, and panic seized her chest. Then the previous night came flooding back, along with the realization that she was warm, safe, and alive. She sat up slowly, her body stiff and sore but no longer frozen to the bone. The smell of cooking food drew her from the bedroom. Mitchell stood at the stove, his back to her, and she took a moment to study him properly. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 25 or 26, only a few years older than her own 22 years. His clothes were well worn but clean, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own space. Good morning, she said, and he turned immediately, a smile crossing his face. Good afternoon, actually. You slept nearly 14 hours, which is exactly what you needed. How do you feel? Tabitha considered the question honestly. Sore, hungry, and extremely grateful to be alive. How is the storm? Still raging, I am afraid. We received another foot of snow during the night, and the wind shows no signs of stopping. I have never seen anything quite like it in this part of California. Usually our winters are mild compared to the eastern territories. He served her breakfast, or perhaps it should be called lunch given the hour. Eggs, bacon, fresh bread, and more of that wonderful tea. Tabitha ate more slowly this time, savoring every bite while Mitchell sat across from her with his own plate. I checked on your mare this morning, he said between bites. She is doing well, all things considered. A few days of rest and good food and she should make a full recovery. She is a tough animal. She has carried me faithfully for many miles. I purchased her in Kansas before we began the journey west. My husband said every pioneer woman needed a good horse. Your husband was a wise man. What was his name, if you do not mind my asking? Thomas Owens. We married young, just after I turned 18. He had such dreams for our future, such plans for the life we would build together in California. He wanted to start a freight business, said there was opportunity in moving goods between the mining towns and the cities. Then the fever took him, and all those dreams died with him. Mitchell's expression was sympathetic. Yet here you are, still fighting to reach California, still working to build a future. That takes remarkable strength. Or remarkable stubbornness, Tabitha said with a sad smile. Sometimes I cannot tell the difference anymore, but what choice did I have? I could have stayed in Nevada and tried to find work, but I was already showing by then. No one wants to hire a pregnant widow. At least here, with family, I thought I might have a chance." "You do have a chance," Mitchell said firmly. "Just because James is gone does not mean you are without options. Yuba City is a growing town, and there are opportunities for someone willing to work hard. Once you have recovered from the birth and regained your strength, I am certain we can find you employment." The casual way he said, we made something warm bloom in Tabitha's chest. She barely knew this man, yet he spoke of her future as though it concerned him personally. "You are very kind, but I cannot impose on you indefinitely. You have already done more than anyone could reasonably expect." Mitchell set down his fork and looked at her intently. "Miss Owens, let me be frank with you. I live alone on this ranch, working dawn until dusk to maintain it. I have no family nearby, no wife, no children. The loneliness can be crushing at times. Having you here, caring for someone other than myself and my animals, it reminds me that there is more to life than work and survival. So perhaps you are doing me a service as well." Tabitha did not know how to respond to such honest vulnerability. Men in her experience rarely admitted to loneliness or any emotion beyond anger or satisfaction. "How long have you lived here?" she asked instead. 5 years. I came west from Missouri after my parents died in a fire. I used the small inheritance they left to purchase this land and build the ranch. It is not much, but it is mine, earned through honest work and sweat. I raise cattle primarily, sell them to the mining camps and towns when they are ready. It provides a decent living, enough to keep me fed and the ranch maintained. Do you ever think about marrying, starting a family?" Mitchell laughed, but there was a touch of sadness in the sound. "Often, truth be told. But eligible women are scarce in these parts, and I am not the type to frequent the saloons and dance halls where men usually meet such women. I suppose I always imagined that when the time was right, someone would come into my life naturally, without me having to search for her." He glanced at Tabitha as he said this, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. Surely he could not mean what she thought he meant. She was pregnant with another man's child, a widow still deep in mourning. She had nothing to offer someone like Mitchell Yates. Yet something in his eyes suggested he saw things differently. Before she could pursue this uncomfortable line of thought, a sharp pain seized her abdomen. Tabitha gasped and pressed a hand to her belly, waiting for it to pass. Mitchell was on his feet immediately, concern etched across his features. "What is wrong? Is it the baby?" The pain faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Tabitha slightly breathless. "I think it was just a cramp. The baby has been more active than usual since I warmed up. Perhaps the cold affected things more than I realized." Mitchell did not look entirely convinced, but he sat back down slowly. "If you feel anything else unusual, you must tell me immediately. I may not be a midwife, but I will do everything I can to help if the baby decides to come early." "You are very kind to someone you barely know. Perhaps I am a terrible judge of character, but I feel as though I know you better than the length of our acquaintance would suggest. There is something about sharing a roof during a blizzard that accelerates familiarity, I think." Tabitha found herself smiling despite the lingering discomfort in her belly. "I suppose you are right. In normal circumstances, it would be terribly improper for an unmarried woman to stay in a bachelor's home without a chaperone. In normal circumstances, unmarried pregnant women do not arrive on doorsteps during blizzards," Mitchell countered with a grin. "I think we can safely say propriety has taken a temporary leave of absence given the situation." They spent the rest of the day in comfortable conversation, the storm continuing to rage outside while warmth and companionship filled the interior of the ranch house. Mitchell proved to be an excellent storyteller, sharing tales of his years as a cowboy before purchasing his ranch, of cattle drives and close calls with bandits, and the occasional ornery bull. Tabitha found herself laughing more than she had in months, the sound strange and welcome after so much grief and hardship. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Ohio, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a seamstress. She spoke of learning to read before most children could tie their shoes, of helping her mother with needlework to earn extra money, of meeting Thomas at a church social when she was 17. She described the whirlwind courtship, the dreams they had shared, the excitement of setting out for California together. "He would have liked you," she said at one point, surprising herself with the observation. Thomas always said the measure of a man was not in his words but in his actions. "You have proven yourself to be a man of considerable measure, Mitchell Yates." Mitchell looked down at his hands, appearing almost embarrassed by the praise. "I am simply doing what I was raised to do. My mother always said that we are put on this earth to care for one another, that there is no higher calling than to ease another person's suffering when we have the means to do so. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman." She was. "Losing her and my father at the same time was the hardest thing I have ever endured. I think part of the reason I came west was to run from that grief, to start over where nothing reminded me of them. But grief follows you wherever you go, I learned. You cannot outrun it. You can only learn to carry it alongside the rest of your life." Tabitha understood exactly what he meant. She still carried the weight of Thomas's death like a stone in her chest, but somehow it felt slightly lighter when she was talking with Mitchell, when she was thinking about something other than loss and uncertainty. As evening approached, Mitchell began preparing dinner. Tabitha insisted on helping despite his protests, and they worked side by side in the small kitchen, their movements gradually synchronizing as they grew accustomed to each other's presence. It felt strangely domestic, almost like they were a married couple rather than strangers thrown together by circumstance. The baby kicked hard against Tabitha's ribs, and she pressed a hand to the spot with a small gasp. Mitchell immediately noticed, his brow furrowing with concern. "Another pain?" "No, just a particularly enthusiastic kick. This child seems determined to make his or her presence known at all times." Mitchell hesitated, then asked, "May I? I have never felt a baby move before." Tabitha knew she should probably say no, that such intimacy was inappropriate, but something in his earnest expression made her nod. Mitchell placed his hand gently on her belly, his palm warm through the fabric of her dress. They stood very still, waiting, and then the baby kicked again, right against Mitchell's hand. His face lit up with wonder. "That is extraordinary. There is a whole person in there, a whole life about to begin." "Yes," Tabitha whispered, suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth of his hand on her stomach, of the way he was looking at her. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself." Mitchell removed his hand slowly, almost reluctantly. "That child is lucky to have you as a mother. Any baby would be fortunate to be born to someone as brave and determined as you are. I hope the baby thinks so when he or she is old enough to understand that their mother brought them into the world alone, without a father or a proper home." "You are not alone," Mitchell said quietly but firmly. "Not anymore, not while you are under my roof." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Tabitha wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to understand the emotions she saw flickering in his dark eyes, but she was afraid of the answer, afraid of hoping for something that might not be real. They finished preparing dinner in silence, though it was a comfortable quiet rather than an awkward one. As they ate, the storm finally began to show signs of easing. The wind no longer howled quite so fiercely, and the snow fell more steadily rather than in wild, chaotic gusts. "It should be safe to travel to town in another day or two," Mitchell observed, looking out the window. "The roads will need time to clear, but once they do, I can take you to meet Sarah Chen, the midwife. She is one of the most skilled medical practitioners in the region, and she will be able to help you prepare for the birth." Tabitha nodded, though part of her felt strangely reluctant to leave the warm sanctuary of Mitchell's ranch. Here, she felt safe and cared for in a way she had not experienced since Thomas's death. The thought of returning to the uncertainty of the wider world filled her with anxiety. "What troubles you?" Mitchell asked, his perceptiveness catching her off guard. "I suppose I am worried about what comes next, where I will live, how I will support myself and the baby. All the questions I was running from by traveling here." Mitchell set down his fork and regarded her seriously. "I have a proposal for you, and I want you to hear me out completely before you respond." Tabitha's heart began to beat faster. "All right. Stay here. Not just until the baby is born, but after. Live here on the ranch and help me run it. I need someone to manage the household, to help with the cooking and cleaning and eventually the garden come spring. In exchange, you and your child would have a safe home, food, and security. There would be no expectations beyond honest work and companionship. You would have your own room, your privacy, and my respect." Tabitha stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. "You want me to work as your housekeeper. I want you to stay," Mitchell said simply. "I want to help you raise your child and build a life here. I know we barely know each other, and I know this is sudden, but sometimes life presents opportunities that we must seize before they disappear. I think we could help each other, Tabitha. I think we could build something good together. But people will talk. An unmarried woman living with an unmarried man, it will cause scandal." Mitchell nodded slowly. "You are right, of course, which is why I have an alternative proposal, though I realize it may be too bold, too presumptuous. We could marry. A marriage of convenience and mutual benefit. You would have my name and the protection that comes with it. Your child would be legitimate in the eyes of the law and society, and I would have a family, something I have wanted for longer than I care to admit." Tabitha felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath her. Marriage. To a man she had known for barely a day, it was madness, completely impractical and illogical. Yet as she looked at Mitchell's honest, open face, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, she found herself actually considering it. "I do not love you," she said quietly. "I barely know you. And I am still grieving my husband. It would not be fair to you to enter into a marriage under such circumstances." "I am not asking for love," Mitchell replied. "Not yet, anyway. I am offering partnership, security, and the chance to build something together. Love, if it comes, will be a gift. But even without it, we could have respect, friendship, and shared purpose. Is that not worth something? You deserve better than a woman who cannot give you her whole heart. I deserve honesty, loyalty, and someone who will work alongside me to build a good life. You have already demonstrated all of those qualities. Everything else we can figure out as we go." Tabitha placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby shift and turn within her. What would Thomas want her to do? Would he want her to spend the rest of her life alone, struggling to survive and raise their child in poverty? Or would he want her to seize this chance at security and companionship, even if it meant marrying someone else? "I need time to think," she said finally. "This is too big a decision to make in a single evening." Mitchell nodded immediately. "Of course. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless of how long you need to consider it. And if you ultimately decide you would prefer to find your own way in Yuba City, I will help you do that as well. I promise you are not trapped here, Tabitha. You always have choices." That night, lying in Mitchell's bed while he slept by the fire, Tabitha stared at the ceiling and tried to organize her chaotic thoughts. Every practical consideration pointed toward accepting his proposal. She would have a home, security, and a father for her child. Mitchell was kind, hardworking, and honorable. Many women married for far less, but the thought of marrying someone she did not love, of standing before God and promising herself to a man who was still essentially a stranger, felt like a betrayal of everything she had shared with Thomas. Her marriage had been built on genuine love and affection. Could she really enter into another one that was based purely on convenience? The baby kicked hard, as if offering an opinion on the matter. Tabitha smiled sadly and rubbed the spot. "What do you think, little one? Should we stay here with the kind cowboy, or should we strike out on our own and see what fortune brings us?" The baby kicked again, and Tabitha chose to interpret it as approval. Perhaps she was rationalizing, finding signs where none existed, but she needed something to guide her decision. The storm finally broke the next morning, leaving the world buried under several feet of snow but revealing a brilliant blue sky. Mitchell ventured out to check on the animals and clear paths between the buildings, while Tabitha made breakfast and tried to imagine what her life might look like if she accepted his proposal. She would wake each morning in this house, cook meals in this kitchen, share her days with this man who had saved her life. She would watch her child grow up on this ranch, learning to ride horses and tend cattle. It would be a good life, a safe life, even if it was not the life she had originally planned. When Mitchell returned, stamping snow from his boots and bringing a rush of cold air with him, Tabitha had made her decision. "I will marry you," she said before she could lose her courage. "If the offer is still genuine, if you truly meant what you said, then I accept." Mitchell froze halfway through removing his coat, his eyes widening. "You are certain? I do not want you to feel pressured or obligated." "I am certain." "You are right that we could help each other, that we could build something good together. I may not love you yet, but I like you, Mitchell Yates. I respect you. And I think perhaps, in time, affection could grow into something more. My child deserves a stable home and a father figure, and I would be a fool to refuse such an offer out of mere stubborn pride." A smile spread across Mitchell's face, so genuine and full of joy that it transformed his entire appearance. "You have made me very happy, Tabitha. Happier than I have been in years. I promise I will do everything in my power to be a good husband to you and a good father to your child." "Our child," Tabitha corrected gently. "If we are to do this, if we are to be a family, then this baby will be yours as much as mine. I will not have my child growing up feeling like an outsider in their own home." Mitchell crossed the room and took her hands in his grip warm and strong. "Our child, then. And I will love this baby as my own, I swear it. This child will never want for affection or security." They stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped, looking into each other's eyes and making silent promises about the future they would build together. Then Mitchell cleared his throat and said, "We should travel to town as soon as the roads are passable. We can speak to the preacher and arrange for a proper ceremony, and you can meet Sarah Chen as well. How long do you think before we can travel?" "Another day or two at most. The sun is already working on melting the snow, and the main road into Yuba City sees enough traffic that it should clear relatively quickly." The next 2 days passed in a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Tabitha found herself watching Mitchell more carefully, studying the man who would soon become her husband. She noticed how gently he treated the animals, how he always made sure she was comfortable before seeing to his own needs, how he sang softly to himself while working. These small observations built a picture of someone fundamentally decent, someone she could see herself building a life with. Mitchell, in turn, seemed to be making similar assessments. She would catch him watching her with a thoughtful expression, as though trying to memorize her features and mannerisms. When their eyes met during these moments, he would smile and quickly look away, almost shy despite his earlier boldness in proposing marriage. On the third day after the storm, Mitchell declared the road safe enough for travel. He hitched his strongest horses to a sturdy wagon, padded the bed with blankets and furs, and helped Tabitha climb aboard with careful hands. She appreciated his attentiveness, especially as her belly seemed to have grown even larger overnight, and her movements had become increasingly awkward. The journey to Yuba City took several hours, the wagon moving slowly through snow-packed roads. Tabitha had time to observe the landscape, the way the winter sun sparkled on the fresh snow, the dark silhouettes of pine trees against the bright sky. California was beautiful in a way that was completely different from Kansas or Ohio. This land felt wilder, more untamed, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. Yuba City itself was larger than Tabitha had expected, with several streets of buildings, shops, and houses. Mitchell guided the wagon toward a modest white church on the edge of town, where he said they would find Reverend John Matthews. The Reverend was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle manner, and he listened carefully as Mitchell explained their situation. "A marriage of necessity, then," the Reverend said thoughtfully. "I am not opposed to such arrangements, especially given your circumstances, Miss Owens. However, I must insist on speaking with each of you separately before I agree to perform the ceremony. I need to ensure you both understand what you are undertaking, and that neither party is being coerced." Mitchell and Tabitha agreed, and the Reverend led Tabitha into his small office while Mitchell waited in the church proper. Once they were alone, Reverend Matthews fixed her with a penetrating stare. "Tell me truthfully, young lady, do you want this marriage, or are you simply desperate and out of options?" Tabitha took a deep breath before answering. "Both, I suppose. Yes, I am desperate. I am pregnant, widowed, and alone in a strange place. But I also genuinely believe Mitchell Yates is a good man who will treat me and my child well. Is that not enough foundation for a marriage? Many successful marriages have been built on less," the Reverend admitted. "But I worry about you entering into this union while still grieving your first husband. The heart needs time to heal, Miss Owens." "My heart may take years to fully heal, Reverend. But my child will be born in a matter of weeks, and I cannot wait for grief to run its course before providing security for us both. Mitchell understands that I do not love him, not yet. He has been honest about his expectations, which is more than many women can say about their husbands." The Reverend nodded slowly. "Very well. I will perform the ceremony, but I want you to promise me something. Promise me that you will give this marriage a genuine chance. Do not let your grief for your first husband prevent you from building something real with your second. Mitchell Yates deserves a wife who is present in the marriage, not one who is always looking backward." "I promise," Tabitha said, and she meant it. Mitchell had offered her so much, asking relatively little in return. The least she could do was approach their marriage with honest effort and open-mindedness. Mitchell's conversation with the Reverend must have gone similarly well, because when they reconvened in the church, Reverend Matthews agreed to perform the ceremony that very afternoon. First, however, Mitchell insisted on taking Tabitha to meet Sarah Chen, the midwife. Sarah lived in a neat house on the other side of town, and she answered the door with a warm smile that immediately put Tabitha at ease. She was a small Chinese woman in her 40s with clever eyes and capable hands, and she invited them in with genuine enthusiasm. "Mitchell Yates, "You are the last person I expected to see escorting a pregnant woman to my door," she said with good-natured teasing. "Have you been keeping secrets from the town?" "The situation is somewhat complicated," Mitchell admitted, and he proceeded to explain everything that had happened over the past few days. Sarah listened intently, her expression growing more sympathetic with each detail. "You poor dear," she said to Tabitha when Mitchell finished his account. "What an ordeal you have endured. Let me examine you and make sure both you and the baby are healthy after such a traumatic journey." The examination was thorough but gentle, and when it was complete, Sarah pronounced both mother and baby to be in good health. "The child could come any time in the next 2 to 4 weeks," she said. "I recommend you avoid any strenuous activity and get plenty of rest. When your labor begins, send for me immediately. I will come to the ranch and help deliver the baby." "Thank you," Tabitha said, relief flooding through her. "I have been so worried about giving birth without any help or guidance." "You will not be alone," Sarah assured her. "And you have chosen well in Mitchell. He may not know much about delivering human babies, but he has a steady hand and a calm demeanor, which is half the battle during childbirth." They said their goodbyes and returned to the church, where Reverend Matthews had gathered 2 witnesses for the ceremony: his wife Alina and the town's general store owner, Mr. Peterson. The wedding was brief and simple, nothing like the elaborate celebration Tabitha had enjoyed when she married Thomas. But there was something profound about the simplicity, about standing before these few witnesses and pledging herself to a new future. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Mitchell kissed her gently on the cheek, a gesture of respect rather than passion. Tabitha felt a confusing mixture of relief and disappointment. This was what she had wanted, what she had agreed to, a marriage of convenience without romantic expectations. Yet some small part of her had hoped for something more, some spark of connection beyond mere practicality. After the ceremony, Mitchell took her to the general store to purchase supplies and a few items he insisted she would need. When she protested the expense, he simply shook his head and said, "You are my wife now, Tabitha. Providing for you and our child is my responsibility and my privilege. Please allow me to do this." The word "our" when referring to the baby still startled her, but she was beginning to appreciate how fully Mitchell had committed to this arrangement. He was not treating the child as some burden he was reluctantly accepting, but as a wanted addition to their family. They arrived back at the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink. Mitchell helped Tabitha down from the wagon with the same careful attention he had shown since they met, and they stood for a moment in the fading light, taking in the sight of their home. "How do you feel, Mrs. Yates?" Mitchell asked softly. Tabitha tested the name in her mind and found it did not feel as strange as she had feared. "Tired but hopeful. Today has been overwhelming in the best possible way. I am glad. Come inside and rest while I tend to the horses and bring in the supplies. We can have a quiet dinner and an early night. You have had more than enough excitement for one day." That evening established a pattern they would follow in the days to come. Mitchell handled the outdoor work and heavy labor while Tabitha managed the house, cooking meals and keeping everything organized. They worked well together, their rhythms complementing each other in surprising ways. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk, sharing more details of their lives and gradually building the foundation of genuine friendship. A week after their wedding, Tabitha woke in the night to a strange sensation. At first, she thought it was just another kick from the baby, but then she realized her nightgown was wet and a dull ache had settled low in her back. Understanding dawned with startling clarity. Her water had broken and labor was beginning. She rose carefully and made her way to the main room, where Mitchell slept on a bedroll by the fire. He had insisted on maintaining separate sleeping arrangements out of respect for her comfort and privacy. "Mitchell," she said quietly, and he was awake instantly, years of ranch life having given him the ability to wake at the slightest sound. "What is wrong?" he asked, already on his feet. "The baby is coming. My water broke and I am starting to feel contractions. We need to send for Sarah." Mitchell moved with impressive efficiency. He dressed quickly, helped Tabitha back to the bed, and then headed out into the cold night to saddle a horse. "I will ride to town and bring Sarah back," he said before leaving. "Try to stay calm and breathe through the pains. I will return as quickly as possible." Left alone, Tabitha tried not to panic. The contractions were still relatively mild and far apart, which she knew from conversations with other women meant she likely had hours still ahead of her. But the knowledge that she was truly about to give birth, that the baby she had carried for 9 months was finally coming into the world, filled her with a mixture of excitement and terror. Mitchell returned with Sarah in record time, both of them wind-blown and concerned. Sarah immediately took charge, examining Tabitha and pronouncing that everything was progressing normally. "You have quite a wait ahead of you," she said matter-of-factly. "First babies take their time. The contractions will gradually get stronger and closer together. Mitchell, boil water and gather clean linens. Tabitha, save your strength and try to rest between contractions." The next hours blurred together in a haze of increasing pain and exhaustion. Sarah remained calm and encouraging throughout, and Mitchell proved to be an excellent assistant, following Sarah's instructions without hesitation. When the contractions grew intense enough that Tabitha cried out, Mitchell held her hand and spoke softly to her, his steady presence a lifeline in the storm of pain. "You are doing wonderfully," he murmured during a particularly difficult contraction. "You are the strongest woman I have ever known. Our baby is almost here." Tabitha clung to his words, to the warmth of his hand in hers, to the promise that this agony would eventually end. She had never experienced anything so intense, so all-consuming. Every part of her body was focused on the single task of bringing this child into the world. Finally, as dawn light began to creep through the windows, Sarah announced it was time to push. Tabitha bore down with every ounce of strength she possessed, feeling as though she was being torn apart from the inside out. Mitchell supported her back, his voice never wavering as he encouraged her through each push. "I can see the head," Sarah said excitedly. "One more big push, Tabitha. Just one more." Tabitha gathered her remaining strength and pushed with everything she had. She felt a sudden release, heard a thin wail, and then Sarah was laughing and saying, "It is a boy, a healthy, beautiful boy." Tears streamed down Tabitha's face as Sarah placed the baby on her chest. The infant was red and wrinkled and perfect, with a head of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. He quieted immediately when he felt his mother's heartbeat, his blue eyes trying to focus on her face. "Hello, little one," Tabitha whispered. "I am your mother and I love you so much." She looked up to find Mitchell staring at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder. "He is beautiful," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Tabitha asked, and Mitchell nodded wordlessly. She carefully transferred the baby to his arms, and Mitchell cradled the infant as though he was made of spun glass. "Hello, son," Mitchell said softly. "Welcome to your home. I am going to take care of you and your mother for as long as I live. That is my promise to you." Watching her husband hold her child, Tabitha felt something shift in her chest. This was not the life she had planned, not the family she had imagined, but it was real and it was hers. Mitchell had kept every promise he made to her, had been kind and patient and supportive through everything. Perhaps love was not just something that happened to you. but something you built through shared experience and mutual respect. Sarah finished the necessary medical tasks, and then announced she would stay for a few hours to make sure both mother and baby were stable before returning to town. "You did excellently, Tabitha," she said warmly. "And you as well, Mitchell. I have seen many fathers faint or flee during delivery, but you stayed steady throughout. This boy is lucky to have you both." After Sarah left, Mitchell made food while Tabitha rested with the baby. The child nursed easily, which Sarah had said was a good sign, and then fell into a peaceful sleep. Tabitha watched his tiny chest rise and fall, still amazed that this person had come from her body, that she was responsible for this fragile life. "Have you thought about names?" Mitchell asked as he brought her a plate of food. "I want to name him Marcus," Tabitha said. "Marcus Thomas Yates. Thomas for my first husband, so the baby will always carry a piece of his biological father with him. But Marcus because it is strong and good, and because it starts with M like yours does. Is that acceptable to you?" Mitchell's eyes were suspiciously bright. "It is more than acceptable. Marcus Thomas Yates. It is a fine name for a fine boy. Thank you for honoring your first husband that way. It speaks well of your character that you want to remember him." "He deserves to be remembered," Tabitha said quietly. "He loved this baby before anyone else did, before the child even existed. I will make sure Marcus knows about his biological father, about the man who wanted him so much. And I will make sure Marcus knows he is loved and wanted by his real father as well," Mitchell said firmly. "Biology is one thing, but being a father is about showing up every day, about teaching and guiding and loving unconditionally. I intend to be a real father to Marcus in every way that matters." Over the following weeks, Tabitha watched Mitchell prove those words true. He woke for every nighttime feeding, changing Marcus's diaper and walking him back to sleep when Tabitha was too exhausted to do so herself. He built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, carving it with intricate designs of horses and cattle. He sang lullabies in a surprisingly pleasant voice, making up silly words that made Tabitha laugh despite her exhaustion. Being new parents brought them closer together in ways Tabitha had not anticipated. There was an intimacy in sharing the middle-of-the-night feedings, in working together to soothe a crying baby, in marveling over every small milestone Marcus achieved. They functioned as a team, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating the victories together. Spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and new life to the ranch. Tabitha had regained most of her strength, and she threw herself into creating a proper home for their family. She planted a vegetable garden, sewed curtains for the windows, and even convinced Mitchell to build her a chicken coop so they could have fresh eggs. One evening in late April, they sat on the porch watching the sunset while Marcus slept peacefully in his cradle. Mitchell had his arm around Tabitha's shoulders, a gesture that had become increasingly common as they grew more comfortable with each other. "I have been thinking," Mitchell said quietly, "about how you came to be here, about how we met. It seems impossible that just a few months ago we were strangers, and now I cannot imagine my life without you and Marcus in it." Tabitha leaned into his warmth, feeling safe and content in a way she had not experienced since Thomas's death. "I have been thinking similar thoughts. When I arrived here that night, I was so certain my life was over that the best I could hope for was survival. But you gave me so much more than that. You gave me a home, a family, and a reason to look forward to each new day." Mitchell tilted her chin up so their eyes met. "I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not frighten you or make you uncomfortable. I know we married for practical reasons. I know you were not looking for love when you came here, but Tabitha, I have fallen in love with you. Somewhere between rescuing you from that blizzard and watching you become a mother, I lost my heart completely. You do not have to feel the same way, but I needed you to know the truth." Tabitha's breath caught in her throat. She had sensed his growing affection, had felt something shifting between them, but hearing the words spoken aloud made everything suddenly real. She thought about the past few months, about how Mitchell had become her first thought upon waking and her last thought before sleep. She thought about how his smile could lighten her darkest moods, how his presence made everything feel more manageable. She thought about the way her heart sped up when he entered a room, how she found excuses to touch his hand or shoulder, how she had begun to imagine a future that stretched decades into the distance with him by her side. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I did not plan to fall in love again, did not think my heart was capable of it after losing Thomas. But you have shown me that the heart is more resilient than we give it credit for, that it can heal and love again without diminishing what came before. You have become the center of my world, Mitchell Yates, and I cannot imagine my life without you either." Mitchell kissed her then, not the chaste peck he had given her at their wedding, but a real kiss full of passion and tenderness and promise. Tabitha kissed him back, pouring all her gratitude and affection and hope into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I want to do this right," Mitchell said. "I want to court you properly, to give you the romance you deserve. We may have married out of necessity, but we can still build the kind of love story people tell their grandchildren about." And he did exactly that. Over the following months, Mitchell courted his own wife with a dedication that would have been comical if it was not so utterly charming. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, wrote her clumsy but heartfelt poetry, planned special dinners after Marcus was asleep. He told her every day that he loved her, that she was beautiful, that he felt like the luckiest man alive to call her his wife. Tabitha bloomed under his attention, her natural joy and humor returning after the long months of grief and struggle. She laughed freely, sang while she worked, and began to see their ranch not as a refuge but as a true home. She watched Marcus grow from a tiny infant into a chubby, cheerful baby who clearly adored his father, reaching for Mitchell whenever he entered the room and babbling happily when held in his strong arms. Summer brought the hard work of cattle drives and hay harvesting, but it also brought long, warm evenings, and the sense that their little family was thriving. Mitchell hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increased workload, and Tabitha found she enjoyed having other people around. The young men, both in their early 20s, treated her with respectful kindness, and clearly admired the relationship she and Mitchell had built on their first wedding anniversary. Mitchell surprised Tabitha with a beautiful gold locket. Inside, he had placed a tiny portrait of Marcus on one side and a lock of her hair on the other. "I know our wedding day was not particularly romantic," he said as he fastened the locket around her neck. "But I wanted to mark this anniversary properly, to celebrate the year we have built together and all the years still to come." Tabitha touched the locket with trembling fingers, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "This past year has been the hardest and best of my life," she said. "I lost so much when Thomas died, but I gained so much when I found you. You have given me everything I needed and so much more than I ever dared to hope for." That night, their marriage became a true marriage in every sense of the word. Mitchell was gentle and patient, making sure Tabitha felt safe and cherished through every moment of intimacy. Afterward, lying in his arms in what was now their shared bed, Tabitha felt a completeness she had not known was possible. This was not the desperate, youthful passion she had shared with Thomas, but something deeper and richer, a love built on genuine knowledge of each other's strengths and flaws. The following spring brought news that made their happiness complete. Tabitha was pregnant again. This time, there was no fear or uncertainty, only joy and anticipation. Mitchell was beside himself with excitement, constantly fussing over Tabitha and making sure she did not overexert herself. "I already have one child who is not biologically mine but whom I love as my own," he said one evening, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Now, I will have another child who shares my blood as well. I am the richest man in California, Tabitha, not in gold or land, but in love and family." Marcus, now a toddler, seemed to sense something was changing. He became more cuddly with his mother, often resting his head against her belly as though listening for the baby within. Mitchell would find them like that, and his heart would swell with such fierce love he thought it might burst. This pregnancy was easier than the first, partly because Tabitha was not grieving and desperate, and partly because she had Mitchell's unwavering support. When she felt ill, he took over all the household tasks without complaint. When she craved strange food combinations, he rode to town to fetch whatever she requested. When she grew large and uncomfortable in the final months, he rubbed her aching back and feet every evening. Sarah Chen predicted the baby would arrive in early September, and she was proven correct when Tabitha went into labor on a warm September morning. This delivery was faster than the first, and by early afternoon, Tabitha was holding a tiny baby girl with Mitchell's dark hair and her delicate features. "She is perfect," Mitchell breathed, tears streaming openly down his face. "Our daughter, our beautiful daughter. What should we name her?" Tabitha asked, exhausted but happy. "You choose," Mitchell said. "You gave Marcus a name that honored both families. This time, you should name our daughter whatever feels right to you." Tabitha studied the baby's face, thinking about everything that had brought them to this moment. "Miriam," she said finally. "Miriam Hope Yates. Miriam for you so she carries part of your name, and Hope because that is what you gave me when I needed it most." Mitchell kissed his wife and then his daughter, his heart so full he could barely speak. "Miriam Hope Yates," he repeated. "It is perfect, just like she is, just like our entire family is." Marcus was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to touch her tiny hands and watch her sleep. He took his role as big brother very seriously, bringing her toys and telling her in his limited toddler vocabulary about the ranch and the animals. Watching her son and daughter together, Tabitha felt a sense of peace and rightness she had never imagined possible. As the years passed, the Yates family continued to grow and thrive. 2 more children followed Miriam, a boy they named Matthew and a girl they named Teresa. The ranch prospered under Mitchell's capable management, growing from a modest operation into one of the most successful in the region. But Mitchell never lost sight of what truly mattered, always making time for his wife and children, always putting family before profit. Tabitha became known throughout Yuba City as a woman of remarkable strength and kindness. She helped other women who found themselves in difficult circumstances, offering advice, support, and sometimes shelter. She never forgot how desperate she had been that snowy night when she arrived on Mitchell's doorstep, and she made it her mission to ensure no woman in their community felt that level of despair if she could prevent it. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Mitchell took Tabitha back to the church where they had married. Reverend Matthews had retired, but his successor agreed to renew their vows in a more elaborate ceremony attended by friends and family. This time, when Mitchell pledged to love and cherish Tabitha, there was no uncertainty, no practical considerations, only the deep, abiding love of 2 people who had chosen each other again and again through all of life's challenges. "10 years ago, you saved my life and the life of my child," Tabitha said during the ceremony, her voice strong and clear. "But you did more than that. You gave us a home, a family, and a love I never dared to hope for. You took a desperate widow and her unborn baby and made us yours, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care and affection. I fell in love with you slowly, Mitchell Yates, but I fell completely. You are the finest man I have ever known, and I am grateful every single day that I stumbled into your life during that blizzard. Mitchell could barely speak through his tears, but he managed to say, "You once told me you were carrying my future too, even though you did not know it at the time. That baby you were carrying became my first son, my beloved Marcus. But you were right in ways neither of us understood then. You were carrying my entire future, my wife, my family, my happiness, my purpose. Everything good in my life traces back to the night you arrived heavy with child in the blizzard. You are my past, my present, and my future, Tabitha. And I will love you until the day I die and beyond." Their children, watching from the front pew, beamed with pride at their parents. Marcus, now a strapping young man of 10, already showed signs of becoming as good and decent as the man who raised him. Miriam, sweet and gentle, had her father's steady nature and her mother's compassionate heart. Matthew and Teresa, the youngest, were full of energy and mischief, keeping their parents constantly entertained. After the ceremony, there was a grand celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to share in the Yates family's joy. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and endless toasts to the couple who had built such an extraordinary life together. As the sun set and the party continued, Mitchell and Tabitha slipped away to their favorite spot on the porch, where they had sat so many evenings over the years. They could hear their children playing in the yard, their laughter ringing out clear and joyful in the warm evening air. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if you had not found my ranch that night?" Mitchell asked, his arm around his wife's shoulders in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Tabitha leaned against him, feeling safe and loved and utterly content. "I try not to think about it too much, because it frightens me to consider how close I came to losing everything. But sometimes, in my quieter moments, I marvel at how one terrible storm brought me to exactly where I needed to be. I do not believe in fate necessarily, but I do believe that sometimes life has a way of guiding us to the right place at the right time." "I was so lonely before you came," Mitchell admitted quietly. "I had my ranch, my work, my pride in what I had built, but I was fundamentally alone in a way that ached constantly. Then you appeared, and suddenly everything had meaning and purpose beyond mere survival. You gave me a reason to build something better, to be something better." "We saved each other," Tabitha said simply. "I may have been the one in immediate physical danger, but you were suffering too, just in a different way. We both needed what the other could provide, and we were fortunate enough to recognize that and build something beautiful from it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear the younger children being put to bed by their older siblings, the normal sounds of family life that never failed to make both parents smile. "I want to tell you something I have never fully articulated before," Tabitha said, turning to face her husband. "When I married Thomas, I thought I understood what love meant. I thought it was that rush of excitement, that desperate need to be near someone constantly, that feeling that you might die if you were separated even briefly. And that is a kind of love, a valid and real kind. But what we have built is different and, I dare say, deeper. Our love is steady and reliable, built on mutual respect and genuine friendship. It is not flashy or dramatic, but it is real and lasting and infinitely more precious because we worked for it. We chose each other, not just once on our wedding day, but over and over again in 1,000 small moments. That choice, that daily decision to love and support each other, that is the greatest gift I have ever received." Mitchell pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I love you, Tabitha Yates. More than words can adequately express, more than actions can fully demonstrate. You are my partner in all things, my greatest blessing and my truest friend." They remained like that as the night deepened. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary together. The ranch that had once seemed like merely a place of survival had become a true home, filled with love and laughter and the messy, beautiful chaos of family life. Years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. Marcus grew into a fine young man who eventually took over much of the ranch management, freeing Mitchell to spend more time with his younger children. He met a good woman from town and married her in a ceremony that left both Mitchell and Tabitha weeping with happiness. Miriam showed an unexpected talent for healing, apprenticing with Sarah Chen and eventually becoming a midwife herself. Matthew proved to have a head for business, while Teresa had inherited both her mother's kindness and her father's determination. As grandchildren began to arrive, Mitchell and Tabitha found themselves in the unexpected position of family elders. They shared their story often with the younger generation, wanting them to understand that love could come in unexpected forms, that families could be built as well as born, that sometimes the greatest blessings arrived in the midst of storms. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire extended family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. Mitchell and Tabitha stood before their children's spouses, and their growing collection of grandchildren, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer abundance of their lives. 25 years ago, your mother arrived at my door in the middle of a blizzard," Mitchell told the assembled family. "She was pregnant, alone, and desperate. I took her in because it was the right thing to do, but I had no idea that decision would change my entire life. She brought me Marcus, who became my first son and taught me what it meant to be a father. She brought me love that I had stopped believing I would ever find. And she brought me all of you, this incredible family that has become the center of my world." "Your father saved my life," Tabitha added, her voice strong despite her advancing age. "But he did more than that. He gave me hope when I had none, security when I was most vulnerable, and love when I thought my heart was too broken to ever love again. He showed me that families are not just about blood, but about choice and commitment. Every person in this room is here because your father and I chose to build something together, to create a legacy of love and strength that we hope will continue for generations to come." The celebration lasted late into the night, filled with stories and songs, and the kind of deep joy that comes from being surrounded by people you love and who love you in return. As Mitchell and Tabitha finally said goodnight to the last of their guests and retreated to their bedroom, they felt the satisfaction of a life well lived, of promises kept and dreams exceeded. "You have any regrets?" Mitchell asked as they prepared for bed, a question he had asked periodically over the years. Tabitha's answer, as always, was immediate and firm. "Not a single one. Every hardship, every loss, every moment of fear and uncertainty led me to you and to this life. I would not change a single thing, even the painful parts, because they made me who I am and brought me where I needed to be." They climbed into bed, Mitchell pulling Tabitha close in the way they had done for thousands of nights. Outside, a winter wind was picking up, though nothing like the blizzard that had brought them together so many years ago. This was a gentle wind, one that spoke of change and seasons turning but held no threat or danger. "You know what I realized recently?" Tabitha murmured, already half asleep. "That blizzard was not really the beginning of our story. It was more like the storm that cleared the way for something new to grow. The real story began when you opened your door and chose to see me not as a burden or an obligation, but as a person worth saving, worth caring for, worth loving. Mitchell kissed her forehead, his heart full of the same love he had felt for this remarkable woman from almost the moment he met her. And you chose to see me not just as a convenient solution to your problems, but as a man worth building a life with, worth trusting, worth loving in return. We saw the best in each other from the start, and we never stopped seeing it, even in our darkest moments. As they drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, both felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the circumstances that had brought them together, which had been terrible and frightening, but for the choices they had made in response to those circumstances. They had chosen hope over despair, love over loneliness, building over breaking. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joys and sorrows. Mitchell's health began to fail as he entered his 60s, his body worn down by decades of hard physical labor. Tabitha nursed him through his declining years with the same fierce devotion he had shown her so many years earlier, when she had arrived desperate and pregnant on his doorstep. "I am not afraid to die," Mitchell told her one evening as they sat together in their bedroom, his hand clasped tightly in hers. "I have lived a full and beautiful life, loved and been loved in return, raised children who make me proud, and built something lasting. What more could any man ask for?" "Stay with me longer," Tabitha pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I am not ready to lose you. I need you, Mitchell. I have needed you from the moment we met, and I will need you until my last breath." "And I will be with you," Mitchell promised. "Maybe not in body forever, but in spirit, in memory, in every part of the life we built together. You are the strongest woman I have ever known, Tabitha. You survived losing Thomas, survived giving birth alone in a blizzard, survived building a new life in a strange place. You will survive losing me too, though I pray you do not have to for many years yet." But survive she did, when Mitchell finally passed peacefully in his sleep one winter morning, surrounded by his family. Tabitha grieved deeply, but she did not break. She had learned, over her long and eventful life, that the human heart was capable of immense resilience, that it could survive unimaginable loss and still find reasons to love and hope. She lived another 15 years after Mitchell's death, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, sharing stories of the man who had saved her life and become her greatest love. She watched her family continue to grow and thrive, saw her grandchildren marry and have children of their own, and knew that the legacy she and Mitchell had built would continue long after she was gone. When Tabitha finally passed away at the age of 82, the funeral drew people from all over California. She was remembered not just as Mitchell Yates' widow, but as a woman who had lived a remarkable life in her own right. She had helped countless women in difficult situations, raised strong and decent children, and shown through her own example that it was possible to survive devastating loss and still build something beautiful. She was buried next to Mitchell on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky so blue it seemed to go on forever. Marcus, now an old man himself, gave the eulogy, speaking of a mother who had given him life twice, once when she bore him into the world, and once when she chose to raise him with love and dignity despite the difficult circumstances of his birth. "My mother arrived here heavy with child in a blizzard," Marcus said, his voice strong despite his tears. "My father told her she was carrying his future too, and he was right. She carried not just me but all of us, the entire family that grew from that moment of connection and choice." Their love story was not perfect or easy, but it was real and it was lasting. It shaped all of our lives in ways large and small, and it will continue to shape the lives of generations yet to come. The Yates Ranch remained in the family for generations, each new owner learning the story of how it had become a true home on that snowy night in 1878, when Tabitha Owens stumbled through a blizzard and found not just shelter, but love, family, and a future she had never dared to imagine. The story became a family legend, told and retold, changing slightly with each telling but always containing the same essential truth. That love could be found in the most unexpected places, that families could be built through choice as much as blood, and that sometimes the worst storms brought the greatest blessings. And so the legacy of Mitchell and Tabitha Yates lived on, a testament to the power of compassion, the resilience of the human heart, and the extraordinary things that could happen when two people chose to see the best in each other and build something beautiful together. Their story had begun with a desperate woman arriving heavy with child in a blizzard, and it had ended with a family tree that stretched across California, filled with people who lived by the values those two extraordinary individuals had instilled through their example: kindness, courage, loyalty, and above all, love that was chosen and nurtured and protected, even in the face of impossible odds. The ranch house still stood a century later, preserved by descendants who understood its significance. Visitors could still see the porch where Mitchell and Tabitha had spent so many evenings, the bedroom where Marcus had been born, the fireplace where a desperate widow had first been warmed back to life. But more importantly, they carried forward the story, ensuring that new generations understood that true love stories were not just about initial attraction or grand romantic gestures, but about daily choices to honor and cherish another person, about seeing someone in their moment of greatest need and choosing to help rather than turn away.